Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel Megha Discourse. Most of the students memorize dates. Most students memorize names. But the ones who actually crack the exam, they understand the writers. They understand the context and the important perspective. And that understanding, that depth is what separates a 60 from a 90 in your paper. So today's class is gonna be a booster class. No fillers, no repetition, no wasted time. We are going to cover major essayists in one single session. And by the end, you will know them so well that any questions this exam throws at you, you will answer with complete confidence. So we are gonna cover these major essayists in full coverage. So let's start our first essayist. He is none other than Michel de Montaigne. The first major essayist is none other than Michel de Montaigne. Every time the word essay comes up in English literature, one name comes first, Michel de Montaigne. He is father of essay, not just the essay, not just the English essay. The essays as a global literary form begin with this man. He inspired Emerson, Francis Bacon, Thomas More, Edgar Allan Poe, and so many other writers. Now, here is what makes him so special. Before Montaigne, writers wrote about kings, about gold, about the philosophy in the abstract. But Michel de Montaigne, he looked inward and he said, I will write about myself, my thoughts, my doubts, my contradictions, my experience. And this is his famous line. And that what revolutionary sounds. So his full name is Michel Joachim de Montaigne, and he was born in 1533. You can look at this slide. And he is related to humanism, Renaissance humanism. He is the philosopher of Renaissance humanism. He is related to skepticism. His major works include essays. It was published in 1580. It was actually a collection of 107 essays. And this is the amazing fact that he coined this term, this word, essay. And he said that essay in French, essay, it means attempt, a trial, a try. He was essentially saying there are many attempts at thinking, not final truth, just attempts. And that's why he described his poor memory through these essays. His motto is to memorize Quincey. This is a French term again. It means, what do I know? He was more curious to know about the world. And this is his philosophical position, his radical humility. He was not claiming to know everything. He was questioning everything. So this is his philosophy. He did not want to know what is moving on, what is going on, what is up to next. He just raised question to everything. Why this is happening like that? And his most famous line, which is RPYQ, that which defines the personal essay forever. I am myself, the matter of my book. Think about how bold that was. In 1580, when writers were think about the God, religion, and this man, he was supposed to write about these type of grand subjects, and this man said, I am the subject. The other thing is not the subject, only I am the subject. And that is why he wrote about his memory, he wrote about his guilt, he wrote about his disbelief on religious ground. He said, my own life, my own mind is what I am writing about. That is my life, my roots. His literary gurus, they are Plutarch and Lucretius. He was highly influenced by Plutarch theory and Lucretius theory, and both are Greco-Roman writers. Now, what type of ideas he was carrying at that time? He wrote his essays, in which we have 107 chapters, as I told you, and the style is very personal. He actually shared anecdotes of his life through these essays. His style is very conversational. That's why he is known as a conversationist writer. Very digressive style. He moves from one thought to another very freely, like a conversation we are having with. There is no rigid structure of his essays. His longest essay is Apology for Raymond Sebald. This is important and your PYQ. This single essay is practically a small book. Look, I am not gonna tell you that this questions come in your 2019 paper, 2025. I will tell you which is important one, and basically we try our best to give you the lecture which is completely based on your PYQ, so that no question will be spared. Okay. Now, Michel de Montaigne, his philosophy was Pyrrhonism. Now, what do you mean by Pyrrhonism? This is important concept so far as this essay is concerned. This is actually an ancient Greek school of radical skepticism. The goal of Pyrrhonism was ataraxia. What is ataraxia? That is peace of mind, emotional calmness. If you suspend all judgment, and you refuse to be dogmatism, you refuse to be in uncertainties about anything, about any time, you achieve inner tranquility. That is, you can say in romanticism, somehow it resembles negative capability. Okay, you enjoy some uncertainties. Why you need to know everything, each and everything, and you know very well it is well said. If you stop knowing everything, you are in peace, you are living in inner happiness stage. This is actually right, and this is what Montaigne said. And after Montaigne, most of the essayists, they follow this one. So that was Montaigne's intellectual goal, that everything is uncertain. Why we need to know each and every point? And it is very uncertain to get whether it is true and whether it is false. This is the game of your understanding. He has written so many essays, like he wrote on marriage, in which he said it is it is necessary for raising children. Marriage is necessary for raising children. But he was deeply suspicious of passionate romantic. He was deeply suspicious about love, about that soulful love. He said he felt it is very detrimental to freedom. He said it is harmful to freedom. Okay, so this is his clear thinking on marriage. The another education. He favored concrete examples and real experience over abstract learning. And this essay, he dedicated this essay to Diana de Foix. She was actually at that time, she was a noble woman and she was pregnant at that time. And he wrote this essay so that the lady, that please raise your children like my philosophy, that do not involve him in memorizing fact, do not involve him in passive learning, fill his mind with knowledge, not just with facts. So these are the views of Michel on education. His influence, if you saw the list, the writer who was influenced by this man, so this is a huge one, like William Hazlitt. He himself was the greatest essayist of England, and he wrote in Table Talk about Montaigne, which is your PYQ. He was the first who had the courage to say as an author what he felt as a man. That is, he expressed everything. Montaigne's entire legacy, that he expressed his personal anecdotes, his personal feeling in his essays. That's why Francis Bacon and Montaigne, they have differences. Another, we have Ralph Waldo Emerson, American essayist. He wrote a book, Montaigne or the Skeptic, and he has given lectures on representative man in his book, that is Representative Man. And he said, it seems like I have written the book so sincerely, does it speak to my thoughts? But it means to say they have similar thinking. We have Friedrich Nietzsche, who also was influenced by Montaigne deeply. Another, we have Stephen Jung, who wrote A Conscience Against Violence, a tribute to Montaigne. And yes, our Shakespeare, he was highly influenced by Montaigne. In The Tempest, he used the essay, the famous essay on cannibals, which is your again PYQ on Montaigne, in which he carries his ideas, and he filtered this through John Florio's English translator of this essay. So another, there is a PYQ who was the translator of Montaigne essay in English, that is John Florio, and he translated On Cannibals, one of the essay, and which Shakespeare used in The Tempest. Okay, so these are some points you should remember about Michel de Montaigne. Also, he wrote of fear or friendship, of solitude, or experience. And there are so many essays. Okay, so we cannot remember all 107 essays, but these are some major ones. And these are some major PYQ so far as this writer is concerned. The next we have Francis Bacon, who was highly inspired by our Michel de Montaigne. And he has somehow the same philosophy, but they have different taste. So I can say if Montaigne brought the essay to France, then Francis Bacon brought it to England. That is why Bacon is called the father of an English essay. He is known as the father of empiricism. Now, Francis Bacon, he was a different kind of person from Montaigne. Montaigne was an introspective, personal, and digressing. But Francis Bacon, he was precise, formal, impersonal, and aphoristic. Aphoristic means tightly packed, witty, satirical remarks. These two men defined the two poles of essay writing, and every essayist since fall somewhere between them. Now, who was Bacon? This is the biggest question we should know about the writers because they can give the chronology question. So he was born in 1561 in London. Now you can have a look on birth of this writer. So he was a philosopher, he was a statesman, he was a Lord Chancellor of England, he was Attorney General. This was not just a writer. This was one of the most powerful men in England. And I have already made two videos on Francis Bacon. First on his essay, other one on the work New Atlantis. So you can also watch that one. So he was actually an Anglican, that is Episcopalian. His early teacher, who was John Welsell, he was a strong Puritan who has strong intellectual influence on him. That's why he is Anglican, or you can say a Puritan mindset. Queen Elizabeth, she called this young Bacon the young Lord Keeper. This is your PYQ because she was impressed highly by his intellectuality. She said at a younger age, he was so intellectual. That's why she called him the young Lord Keeper. A queen recognizing a young man's brilliance. That tells you something. Now, Bacon had three life goals. The first way he has to uncover truth, to serve the country, and to serve the church. And he acted on all these things. His famous philosophical quote is that, and this come to in exams, so listen it carefully, a little philosophy inclined man mind to atheism, but depth in philosophy bringeth man about to religion. It means a little knowledge is dangerous thing. This is again the same philosophy what Montaigne want to say, that why do you need to know everything? If you want to know everything, then go deeper, dive deeper. And similarly, he wants to say that if you want to know anything, then don't get ideas on surface level. Okay. Shallow thinking leads to atheism, disbelief, and deep thinking brings you back to religion. What type of religion you are following? Which kind of religion you are preferring? So that was Bacon's belief. And his philosophy is empiricism. Like Montaigne philosophy is Pioneerism. His philosophy is empirism. Both are related to belief system. Bacon championed empiricism, knowledge through inductive reasoning. He said that be a person of inductive mindset. Start from specific observation, move to general conclusion. So specific to general. This is the what Bacon wants to say. First, you should know about the pond. Then you should dive into sea. He rejects abstract deductive theory like Montaigne. He said that concrete theory is more concrete education over abstract. Similarly, he said that one. That's why he has given Baconian method in his Novum Organum in 1620. And he rejected Aristotelian theory, his philosophy. And this laid the foundation for the scientific revolution. Bacon developed a system of cataloging books. Again, this is important fact, and this is your TGT PGT exam paper. History for history for memory, poetry for imagination, and philosophy for reason. So he cataloging these subjects according to the features. Now he wrote the essay, which have we have three edition of this essay. First we have in 1597, in which he published 10 essays. Then 1612, in which he published 38 essays. Then 1625, in which he published 58 essays. And this is the final edition of 58 essays. And this was published under title, so keep this title in your mind, update your notes, Essays or Counsels, Civil and Moral. So this is the final title of 1625 edition. So at that time, he also wrote New Atlantis in 1626, Novum Organum in 1620, Advancement of Learning in 1605. So far as Bacon is concerned, you should know about the chronology of Bacon, because it is highly expected in paper and it was highly asked repeatedly in your paper. Okay. Now, what about the essays? So firstly, like he wrote Of Truth. So he says in this particular essay, Truth versus Lies, Bacon argues truth has intrinsic beauty, deception is inferior. Okay, so of truth, he was explaining you about some good effect of truth. Then he wrote Of Studies. So I have made video on Of Studies. So in Of Studies, this is the most famous essay and the most famous quote in all of the Bacon. Some books are to be tasted, others to be swallowed, and some few to be chewed and digested. So this is your famous line and your PYQ. So he said reading is good one. So here taste means surface reading, swallow means absorb fully, chew and digest means wrestle with. So you have to wrestle with the concept. So this is what you are chewed and digesting. Now, like you are preparing for UGC NET and you are deeping dive in all the books, all the major works, all the essays. That means you are chewing and digesting the writer's works. Okay. So the same essay has another line which is also famous, like reading makes a full man, conference a ready man, and writing an exact man. So you can also watch the video on Of Studies. You will find it very effective. Like then he wrote Of Revenge. He defines revenge as a violent justice. When justice becomes wild, it becomes revenge. Then he wrote Of Marriage and Single Life. Now, in this topic, he has similar view like Montaigne. He calls his wife and children hostages to fortune. It means that married men take fewer risks. He calls avoiding marriage in one context, that is unwise act. He called that marriage is an unwise act, and fools, they did marriage, and which is also contradictory because he is married one. But it is also that also said that he is homosexual and he has relationship with King James. That is another thing. He wrote like Of Adversity. These are all famous your work, and these are somehow your PYQs. In Of Adversity, he this is the forensic style at its peak in this essay. It was fully dense with wit and wisdom. That he wrote Of Boldness. If the hill will not come to Muhammad, then Muhammad will go to the hill. So this line is from this essay. This is your PYQ, but it is in your TGT PGT exam. Okay. In simple, if you cannot make a person or a situation according to you, then you should change your actions. Okay. So this is the simple one. And later, this hill was changed to mountain by so many writers. This is highly adopted quote of Francis Bacon. Then he wrote Of Plantation. In 1625, it is about planting colonies. It is very controversial work, and it was linked to colonial ideology. He wrote Of Beauty, which is about male beauty. So because why he said that he was homosexual, he had his relationship with King James because of this essay. He wrote these kind of essays like The Masculine Birth of Time. They all are related to they all are related to his homosexual mindset. And that's why John Aubrey, in his work Brief Lives, he mentions that Francis Bacon, he is his relation with homosexuality thinking. Okay, so what is difference between Bacon and Montaigne? Montaigne, he was personal, conversational, digressive, and he uses I in his essays more. But Bacon, he was impersonal, aphoristic, very formal. Okay. And one more thing, yes, there is a Baconian theory of Shakespeare authorship. So this is complete one. Some scholars claim that Bacon wrote Shakespeare plays, and there was another writer, Delia Bacon, who published a pamphlet was Lord Bacon, the author of Shakespeare plays. So it is mostly rejected, but it comes up a trivial question that Bacon has written most of the Shakespeare play, and Shakespeare is actually a group of writers in which you will find Edmund Spenser, Francis Bacon, Walter Raleigh. So this is the controversy so far as Bacon and Shakespeare is concerned, and this is what we call as Baconian theory of Shakespeare authorship. Now, the another major writer we have Jonathan Swift. So this name sounds very gentle. Now the writing is anything but gentle. Jonathan Swift, he is the master of satire in English literature. His satire was not very gentle, corrective kind, but it was a savage, devastating, morally outraged, and his Latin epitaph, which was written on his tomb, says it all, that Saiva indignatio. So I really don't know about the pronunciation in French one, but somehow similar like that. It means savage indignation. That was his life is defining quality. Now, who was Jonathan Swift? So Jonathan Swift was born in 1667. They all are in your chronology. He was an Anglo-Irish, that is, he belongs to Irish background. English speaking Protestant community. He was Anglican. Again, look at all three, they are Anglican, and served as the Dean of St. Patrick Cathedral, Dublin. Now, his satire operated on two levels. First one is Horatian satire, which was gentle, humorous, corrective, laughing at human folly to fix it. Another is Juvenile satire, which is very harsh, savage kind of, morally outraged and attacking vice because it disgusts you. It feels you guilty that you are the corrupt and culprit of the society. So Jonathan Swift primarily worked in juvenile mode. Yes, W.B. Yeats, he translated Jonathan Swift Latin epitaph, which I told you, which was written in savage indignation, and he wrote, Swift has sailed into the rest. So this is your PYQ. In 1726, Swift wrote a poem, Cadenius and Vanessa, for his wife, Esther, his admirer. And in this poem, he invented the name Vanessa, after which this name was famous. So today, Vanessa is a common name worldwide. Swift created it. So he coined this term. He coined this name. He also formed Scribblers Club in 1713. Swift was a founding member of this, along with Pope, Swift, John Gay, and Arthur. All are stylists, all formed this club together. Swift's grandfather family has connections to Sir Erasmus Dryden, making him related to John Dryden, to his family tree. Yes, somehow they all are interrelated to each other. So John Dryden and Jonathan Swift, they both are, you can say, a relative. So let's have a look on his major important work. Like first he wrote A Tale of Tub in 1704, then later in 1710. This is allegory work in which a father leaves three sons a coat each, and he said, actually this represent three reasons: Catholic, Church of England, and Dissenter. And each son corrupts the court and represent religious corruption. And he, like his father said, you need not to alter this court, but they, according to time and according to their wish, they altered that court. Okay, so this is how Swift was Anglican, but he attacked all three religion equally. Then he wrote The Battle of Books, in which he explained about the ancient book versus modern book in a literal war. So Swift side with the ancient classical literature. Then he wrote Gulliver Travels, you know very well. This is a famous one and important for your UGC NET and any exam, because these are some of the important works of these writers. Then he wrote The Drapier Letters, it is on copper coinage, and he was political pamphlet, and it was written anonymously against wood halfpence. I think this is the full name, wood halfpence. Okay, so and then again he wrote An Argument Against Abolishing Christianity. This is ironic defense of normal Christianity, actually attacking free thinkers and atheists by pretending to defend the very Christianity they mock. Now, the most important famous essay, it is The Modest Proposal, which is a masterpiece and this lecture central point. It is written in 1729. Ireland is devastatingly poor at that time. English colonial rule has extracted everything. People are now starving, children are starving, and Swift writes a proposal. This is the modest proposal, but it is not so modest. This is the irony in the title. This is the paradox in the title. That is a modest and a proposal. But this proposal is not modest. The title is so itself is irony. Modest means understated. Something feels wrong. Proposal means terrifying content inside. Now this essay opens with genuine pathos. Ragged children, begging mothers, and real misery. This is not a satire at all. This is the true picture of Ireland at that time. Then come to proposal. There is a well-wisher, Swift in disguise, and he suggests that a young, healthy child of 1 year old is most delicious. So these are the lines of this essay. Grotesque type of image he has given. So grotesque literary device, you should know about this essay. Okay, so this is the quoting he added in this essay. A young, healthy child of 1 year is most delicious, nourishing, and wholesome food, whether stewed, roasted, baked, or boiled. So read that again. Hear this line again. He's suggesting eating babies. So I think now you can remember about Epstein file. He was giving a satire, a staunch satire on the Ireland government. So why is this genius? Number one, he uses the word here, breed, for children, a word we use for livestock. In one word, he strips children of their humanity, and that is exactly what colonial policy was doing to Irish people. They were striping out all the children, all the people. Number two, a child will make two dishes at an entertainment for friends. So this is the line again. That means children reduced to meal portion, cold, clinical, and horrifying, because it is said that men are starving, women are starving. Now we have to care of these children. So he said that, okay, eat the children. So you can solve the problem. Now he said, even the skin of the Irish babies can profit to the wealthy. So these are actually the quoting of this essay. It means English landlords were already extracting every possible resource from Ireland. And Swift asks, what is left? Only the skin of human. So you just strip it off. Now the famous line of this essay, let no one talk to me of other experiments. That is taxing absentees. He is saying if you refuse to talk about the real solutions, then hear my solution. If you cannot solve the problem of Ireland economy, then look, I am giving you a suggestion. You have to act upon my advice. So this is the solution. He has also given the literary device reductio ad absurdum. So this is your famous French term. It take an argument to its most extreme logical conclusion. It means this is the meaning of this word, that he was arguing in most extreme logical conclusion to expose the underlying quality which actually Irish government was doing to their people. So colonial logic taken to its ultimate end. Now there is a paradox at the end of this essay. Selling children for food will make mothers more loving because the children now has economic value. So this is a semi-brilliant and devastating reply to the persons as well. So in this essay, you will find colonial exploitation. England was treating Ireland as a colony, extracting, consuming, destroying, these kind of ideas he has given you. So Swift holds up a mirror of that logic. So a modest proposal is important for exam. He has used juvenile satire. Okay, so and he has given that reductio ad absurdum theme, grotesque imagery. So log that in. You should work on these kind of ideas so far as this work is concerned. So you should do this work. Okay. Now the next we have Charles Lamb. After Jonathan Swift, savage satire, Julian harsh satire, let's slow down. We breathe. We enter the world of Charles Lamb. If Swift was the essayist of rage, Lamb was the essayist of love. They both are different. His biographer, Eve Lucas is the biographer of Charles Lamb. This is again your PYQ. He called him the most lovable figure in English literature. Reading Charles Lamb is like sitting with an old friend by fireplace, warm, funny, nostalgic, and underneath all of that, quietly heartbreaking. Now, who was Charles Lamb? He was born in 1775. So in chronology, He was asked many times. Okay, and he was died in 1834. I think that was not so important. His pen name was Elia. You all know about that. Now, where did this name come from? When Charles Lamb worked at South Sea House, there was an Italian colleague whose last name was Elia. So when Charles Lamb wrote the first essay about that place, that about the South Sea, so he signed it as Elia, and the name stuck for the rest of his career. He belongs to the Romantic movement. His essays was published in the London magazine from 1820 to 1825. Now the magazines are important. It may be asked in chronology. So I have also made a video on magazines. So go and watch that video highly. It is a 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes video. So go and have a look on the chronology of magazines. So his major works are Essay of Elia, was published in 1823, and the last essay of Elia in 1833. So this was the time span of 10 years. So he was friend of Coleridge, Wordsworth, and William Hazlitt. He was at the heart of Romantic literary circle. Actually, they all are in a good friendship circle. Now, what is the tragedy that shaped everything? What is the tragedy happened in Charles Lamb's life that he became so modest? In 1796, Charles Lamb's sister, there is a Mary Lamb. She is in a fit of madness and she killed her mother. Lamb refused to send Mary to a public lunatic asylum because his elder brother John Lamb, he said, he took personal responsibility for her career, for her care, and for the rest of the life. Now, this tragedy is invisible thread running through all his writing, especially Dream Children and New Year's Eve. That's why these two works, they are your PYQ. Okay. He wrote Dream Children, a Rivera. Lamb imagines sitting with two children, telling them stories about this family. But it is all a dream. He never had children and never named them. So the woman he loved is Anne Simmons. She was married to someone else, and the essay ends when the dream dissolves and Lamb wakes up. So you will find here memory loss, unfulfilled longing. It is one of the most frequently devastating thing in English prose. Okay, and that's why this is very important, because you will find some autobiographical approach in this work. Then he wrote Old China. This is a conversation between Lamb and his sister Mary, looking at the old China cups, remembering the days when they were poor but very happy. So theme of nostalgia, simplicity, beauty of poverty is writing is written by our Charles Lamb. Then he wrote The Two Races of Man. Lamb divides all humanity into two groups, borrowers and lenders. Again, it is on poverty. Again, it is on rich versus poor. Funny, satirical, perfectly observed lines you will find in The Two Races of Man. Humor. Okay. Then he wrote Mrs. Battle's Opinion on Whist. A portrait of an old lady who takes the card game, and the card game whist with absolute passionate seriousness, comic, charming, perfect character sketch. Main character is Mrs. Battle. So it can be asked on paper. Then he wrote My First Play. Charles Lamb's memory of seeing a play for the first time as a child. He was written this in this essay, and the enchantment, the wonder, and the transformation. So you will find here nostalgia, childhood, flashback technique in this work. Now the another important work we have New Year's Eve, where Charles Lamb reflects on time passing and his deep reluctance to the old years ago. So you will find time, immortal. Again, in all his works, you will find nostalgic theme, flashback theme, time, poverty. Then he wrote Super Energetic Man. After 33 years working as the clerk at the East India Company, he finally retires. And that's what he writes in this essay. Then he wrote Sanity of True Genius. It is actually an intellectual essay arguing that true genius is not madness. It is higher form of sanity and control. It is connected to his personal experience with Mary. So that is why this is an important work. Then Charles Lamb, he defines quality. He calls it pleasurable whimsy with depth. So this is what he called his essays. Okay. So and this is your PYQ. He calls it essay pleasurable whimsy with depth. On the surface, charming and funny, but underneath it was deeply felt and quietly painful. So that combination is unique in Charles Lamb essay. Now let's move to our next essayist, William Hazlitt. Now we come to the one who is most often you often called simply the great English essayist of his time. Samuel Johnson, George Orwell, William Hazlitt. Those three names, they are placed together as the pinnacle of English prose writing. And this is the company Hazlitt keeps. What made him very different? Absolute honesty. He wrote exactly what he felt. No mask, no performance, no calculation. The essay as a form had never been so nakedly personal before Hazlitt. He wrote whatsoever he thought and whatsoever happened in his life. Now, who was Hazlitt? He was born in 1778 and his biographer is Ralph Waldo. So this is important. E.V. Lucas is the biographer of Charles Lamb. He is related to Romantic movement and he was friend of John Keats, Coleridge, Wordsworth, Charles Lamb. He was at the center of everything. Now, politically, William Hazlitt, he was a passionate liberal. He supported the French Revolution strongly and he maintained the support even when it became unpopular. He rejected all Unitarian philosophy. He believed mind was an active force which, by disseminating knowledge in both science and arts, could reinforce the natural tendency in the humanity towards good. So he said that knowledge as philanthropy, learning and a moral act. Okay, so mind has so much power. So that disseminating knowledge in both science and arts, this is the PYQ. His political agenda is I have hatred of tyranny and contempt for its tool. At the age of 13, Hazlitt writing appeared in print for first time. A letter about Birmingham rights, supporting Joseph Priestley, 13 years old, already politically engaged and already writing for publication. Okay, so you should know about that at the age of 13. First he wrote about Birmingham riots. Now in 1819, his political essay, it was collected, appeared. He read John Locke, David Hartley, David Hume, Edmund Burke, and Rousseau, French thinkers. He said man is a social and political animal. So who has given this line? It is none other than William Hazlitt. So in first he wrote the Round Table in 1817 and at same year we have Biographia Literaria by S.T. Coleridge. So this is the essay collection written by William Hazlitt in which you will find periodical essay that is period based, interval based. And he wrote the important essay in the round table we have on actor and acting, which is on acting skills. And then he wrote on gusto. Gusto here it means energy, aesthetic concept, passionate energy in art. Okay, so when an artist brings their full force and feeling to their work, this is what we call gusto. So Titan had it. Okay, then he wrote lectures on the English poet. These all your PYQ, and in your paper it was asked in chronology based question. Okay, so you should know about the chronology of Francis Bacon and William Hazlitt. So in lectures on English poet, he wrote the famous essay on Shakespeare and Milton. Okay, so this essay is a part of this collection, and he also wrote on poetry in general. So he writes, poetry is the language of the imagination and passions. So this is your PYQ. Now in 1821 and 1822, as we move forward, he wrote Table Talk. This is the pinnacle. Here, Duncan View, he was a scholar. He calls this is the pinnacle of Hazlitt achievement. Art, literature, philosophy, all explored through this prodigal essay. So he wrote on the pleasure of painting, in which he was telling about your painting, on familiar style, on the character of Cobbett, on going on a journey, your PYQ, on Indian jugglers, your PYQ. Okay, so this is another important collection, Table Talk. Then he wrote The Spirit of the Age, your PYQ, in which he will give you 25 character sketches of contemporary literary figures like S.T. Coleridge, we have Charles Lamb, Geoffrey Crayon, William Wordsworth, and all most famous among them. Then he wrote The Plain Speaker, in which you will find on reading old books and on conversation of authors. Okay, so he wrote My First Acquaintance with Poetry. What is difference between genius and skill? He write in this essay. The Jugglers, has mechanical perfection, astonishing skill. But is that genius? No. Hazlitt argues genius is something else, something that comes from a different place entirely. So, actually talking about nature of excellence. Then, in my first acquaintance with poets, it is the most personal essay. So, he met with St. Coleridge and William Wordsworth, and this was his turning point of life when he actually met St. Coleridge. He was a man of genius. This is said by William Hazlitt to St. Coleridge, that St. Coleridge is a man of genius, and that's why he wrote my first acquaintance with poets. He wrote, I could not have been more delighted if I had heard the music of the Spears. This is your PYQ. For whom he has said that? St. Coleridge. And this extraordinary line, what about Coleridge's presence, felt like poetry and philosophy, they had met together. He said that poetry and philosophy, they met together. Truth and genius had embraced under the eye with one sanction of realism. Because St. Coleridge and William Hazlitt, Wordsworth, he met with them and he said that this acquaintance means poetry and philosophy, they are meeting with each other. Truth and genius, they are meeting with each other. Okay, so Wordsworth told Hazlitt, the sense of new style and a new spirit in poetry came over me. Now, another important work like The Flight, he published in New Monthly magazine. Hazlitt attends a boxing match. Okay, so this is your PYQ, and turns it into the most vivid, energetic piece of sport, writing the language. Then, on reading of old books, this is the deep pleasure. In this, you will find the deep pleasure of returning to books you loved years ago, not reading them for the first time, but rereading with the weight of all you lived experience behind you. So you will find here nostalgic appeal, that you have to read your old notes, you have to read your old books. So after first reading, which you read, when you move to a second reading, your mindset will be changed. Okay, that's why it is said that please update your notes, repeatedly read that. That is why it is said that. So one more stylistic note Hazlitt used here is hyperbolic statements and paradoxes. So this is his style. Like aphoristic is the style of Francis Bacon. So hyperbolic statement and paradox is the style of William Hazlitt. And like all country people hate each other. So this is the controversial statement written by William Hazlitt and most famous statement, and deliberately extreme to make a deeper point here. He was associated with Blackwood magazine, which was controversial at that time. Okay, and that Blackwood magazine, he called William Hazlitt as a pimpled Hazlitt and attacked him for his ignorance and dishonesty. So he coined the term ultra cryptarian, which was used in quarterly magazines to mock Thomas Campbell and others, meaning someone who speaks beyond their expertise. This is what he coined, ultra cryptarian. Okay, so these are many essays, they coined different of terms. And now look at this, like we have Montaigne, who coined the term essays, and Francis Bacon, empiricism, Baconian method. We have Jonathan Swift, who coined the term Vanessa. Okay, then we have this William Hazlitt, who coined this term ultra crepidarian. Okay, Thomas Quincey. In the next part, we will cover more another important essays which are not only related to British literature but all over the literature. Now, the most intense chapter is Thomas Quincey, the darkest chapter, and in my ways, this is the most brilliant. Why? Let's have a look. And before that, I have an announcement. On the demand of many students, I have made notes on history of English literature. That was a similar capsule notes because these are enough for your paper, whether you are preparing for entrance exam, GATE, NET, SET, or any teaching exam. So these capsule notes are enough for you so far as history of British literature is concerned. So you can watch master video and then you can read these notes, and this is enough for you. And also in these notes you will find chronology based question, assertion reason question, 100 question from beginner levels to advanced level. You will find each age and the important points of the ages. There is a table in which you will get all the important writers. So if you want to purchase these notes, then you can join our Telegram, and below I will give you link in description box, so you can directly join us. You can also watch the sample of these notes and then you can purchase. Okay, so soon you will get notes on your another units as well. Okay, so now who was Thomas de Quincey? Thomas de Quincey, his full name is Thomas Penson de Quincey. Penson is the name. After that, his mother adopted Quincey and he became Thomas Penson de Quincey. Thomas de Quincey, he was the opium eater. He took his darkest personal truth, addiction, and turned it into art. In doing so, he created his entirely a new literary tradition, addiction literature. So if you are, next time, if someone is asking you about the addiction literature, just answer him, Thomas de Quincey. Now, his prose style, he called his essays impassioned prose. It sits between prose and poetry, the flexibility of prose and the intensity of poetry. That's why his essays are known as verse prose, nothing like it existed before. And that's why I told you it is the most intense chapter. So he was born in 1785. So all are in chronology for your ease. He was related to Romantic movement. He was friend of Wordsworth, Coleridge, Charles Lamb. He lived in Wordsworth, the cottage at Grasmere. After Wordsworth moved, De Quincey moved in. Okay, after Wordsworth, he lived in the same cottage. There is something poetic about an opium addict writing in a great poet's former home. He was a conversationist like Montaigne. People loved talking with him. He admired lyrical ballet like William Hazlitt and wanted to meet Wordsworth even before they formally met. He became editor of Westmoreland Gazette in 1880. So this is your PYQ. Okay, so Westmoreland Gazette was who was editor? Are Thomas de Quincey. This is actually a Tory paper, but he could not meet deadlines and he resigned in 1890. Now, what is the opium story behind? Now, Thomas de Quincey first took opium in 1804 for trigeminal neuralgia. Now, what is this? It is an agonizing nerve condition in the face where this area you will find unbearable facial pain, and opium gave him relief, and then pleasure, and then he was addicted, and then he began using it daily from 1813. So this is how he became opium eater. Now, literature, he has given the concept of literature of knowledge and literature of power. This is the most important Thomas de Quincey concept and important for your paper point of view. Now, what is literature of knowledge? Literature of knowledge, it teaches you, it informs you like a textbook. Once you know the information, the book is used up. Now, literature of power, it moves, sits and transforms. Like great art, you can read it 100 times and feel something new each time. That is literature of power. And literature of knowledge means like a textbook. So you have to decide that you are reading literature for power or for knowledge. He believed that the highest literature is literature of power. He published 3 magazines: London Magazine, Blackwood Edinburgh Magazine, and Tate's Magazine. And Blackwood Magazine, Tate Magazine, they both are opposite to each other. So first he wrote Confession of an English Opium Eater in 1821, which is his masterwork. It was appeared in London Magazine in 1821, and then it was published in book form in 1822, and revised version you will find in 1856. He called it impassionate prose. Earlier I told you that is prose poetry. It was divided into 2 parts. First you will find the confession, in which you will have childhood to youth life of Thomas de Quincey. The journey into opium begins. Then the second, he wrote the pleasure of opium. Here he expressed the pleasure after having opium. Then he also wrote the pain of opium, that is insomnia, nightmare, distortion of time and space. And he wrote the famous quote in this work that the sense of space in the end, in the sense of time. So this is your PYQ. Okay, and he says that the pain of opium is more than pleasure of opium. There is also a haunting line. This is again your PYQ. Mighty opium, that to hearts of poor and rich alike, for wounds that will never heal. It means he wants to say that opium heals everything, which can't be cured, which can be curable, which cannot be curable. Opium heals everything. It is same for poor and rich. Okay, before opium, everyone is alike. So when this appeared in London Magazine first time, it eclipsed Charles Lamb's essay of Elia, which were running on the same publication at that time. It was published in 1833 and this was 1823 and this was published in 1821 time. Okay, so this is how powerful it was. So far as the legacy of the Quincey was concerned, so he inaugurated Western addiction literature, as I told you. Here, Charles Baudelaire, you all know about this writer, Charles Baudelaire. He was directly inspired by Thomas de Quincey, and he wrote Les Paradis Artificials about opium and about opium and hashish. We have similar theme. Then he wrote Suspiria de Profundis, PYQ. It is the sequel of Confession of the Opium-Eater. And Suspiria de Profundis means Science from the Depth, written in 1845. It was published in Blackwood's Edinburgh magazine. This is a sequel. Okay, again it is a prose poem style. It contains a long essay, The Affliction of Childhood. This is now your again PYQ. It is about the death of his sister Elizabeth. And so you will find memory, grief, childhood loss in this work. So the question can be asked about his sister Elizabeth. He wrote an essay. Okay, which is the name of essay, or this is a part of which collection? Okay, and the most important piece within it is that Levina and Our Ladies of Sorrow. This is again a second essay of this collection. You will find here 3 allegorical sisters representing different faces of sorrow, and these all are important because it was adopted as a movie in Hollywood. First, you have Mater Lachemanum. She is mother of tears. Then there is Suspirionum. She is mother of science because after her name the book was titled. Then we have Master Tenebrum. She was mother of darkness. So this can be asked directly in your paper. Also, there is a palimpsest of human brain. It is a parchment that has been written on or scrapped and written on again, but traces of old writing remain same. So he says that the human brain is like this, new experience written over old ones. So this is the palimpsest of human brain. Okay, write, remove, and again rewrite, but nothing truly erased you, because somehow you will find the memory of past. Everything remains somewhere beneath. This is what we call unconscious, subconscious mind. Then he wrote In the English Mail Coach in 1849. This is 3-part masterpiece. 3-part in which this is published in Blackwood magazine in October and December in season. In October you will find part 1. In December you will find part 2 and part 3. So 3 sections, like first he wrote The Glory of Motion. That is a lavish, joyful description of mail coach system. At that time in England, they have mail coach system. Okay, and the speed, the power, the feeling of moving through England at night. Then the vision of sudden death. This is the second part of this essay. Thomas de Quincey is on the coach, intoxicated with opium when a small gig appears on the road and ahead, and a near collision almost occurs. So it was written in extraordinary precision and tension. Then there's a dream figure. This is the 3rd part, in which he will find he wrote about 5 dream sections built musically. He wrote about 5 dream sections and multiple voices, theme of sudden death, dreams, vision, you will find in this part. Okay, and it opens with a quotation which was taken from Paradise Lost. And then another we have On the Knocking at the Gate in Macbeth in 1823. This is a literary critical essay. Argues the audience must feel sympathy of comprehension for Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, not judgment, in order for the play to work. He says that the knocking at the gate, the line, the title, it means reality breaking back in. That is after the descent into evil. It is callback from the hellish world Macbeth has entered. It means, in simple terms, come back to reality, back from evil. Okay. Then he wrote On Murder Considered as one of the fine art. It has 3 editions, 1827, 39, and 54. It is a satirical trilogy. Okay. And it is fictional gentleman club. There's a gentleman club. This is important point. And that treat homicide as an aesthetic event. So this is on murder, that is on homicide. And you will find here the death of Ratcliffe Highway murder. So this is the real story, and he portrayed that is in his work. It was dark, humorous, and aesthetics, which is applied to crime and deadly ironic. In this work, he used 2 pen names. First is Mr. North, who was actually the editor of this magazine, and then Uncle Toby. So he also cited Jonathan Swift, St. Coleridge in this essay. He cited Thomas Hobbes and his Leviathan in this essay. So He also talks about the Newgate England, the Newgate calendar, and he ridiculed Immanuel Kant in this essay. So these are some points you should know about this essay. Further, he wrote Lake Reminiscence, about recollection of lake poets, in which you will find personal portraits of Wordsworth, Coleridge, and Robert Southey. So this is a kind of biographical essay for understanding these poets. He wrote Revolts of Tartars, grammatical historical narrative. Here you will find the exodus of a Tartars tribe. So Tartar is actually tribe. This is your PYQ, and it belonged to Russia, to China. Okay. All right. Let us close this booster class. So you should know about all these things. Now I have 3 questions to ask, and you have to answer my questions. First, who formed Scribblers Club and who was associated with this club? This is your first question. Second question is, what is ataraxia, or who is associated with Pyrrhonism? And the third question is that how many chapters in Essayist written by Michel de Montaigne? Okay, so these are your 3 questions, and you have to answer in the comment section. This is how our booster class on the major essays ends. We have covered 6 writers in single session, and I think no one will gonna teach you like this in a single session, in a single hour. You will get enough knowledge. Okay, so but I want you to leave with something bigger. What you study today is not just a list of names and dates. What you study today is the history of how human beings learn to think on papers. So Montaigne taught us to look inward. Bacon taught us to think systematically with inductive reasoning. Jonathan Swift taught us to use anger as your art. Charles Lamb taught us that tenderness is not weakness. Hazlitt taught us that honesty is one of the real style. And Thomas de Quincey taught us that even the darkest human experience can become something beautiful. So if you do not want to miss the part 2, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and share this video with every person you know who is preparing for the exams. Okay, so because that one share might change their result. This is your preparation. Treat it seriously. See you in the next.